translated, I have been unfair. It probably was motivated more by desperation than repentance. Second, Pharaoh stated, the Lord is righteous. Even if he was not sincere, this statement was clearly accurate. Finally, the Pharaoh confessed, I and my people are wicked. This was a confession of guilt. As we will see, Pharaoh's words were not confirmed by his actions. The fact that he was willing to speak these words, however, points to the effectiveness of the plagues.
Amen. So, if anybody has studied anything about Egypt, and I would say even now, but especially back then, for the most part, when it comes down to Egyptians, Pharaoh being the king of Egypt, they worship many gods, right? One of the most popular gods that they have, or I guess the most high god that they have, they call Ra. And when you think about the Hebrews at that time, when they came to, did I remember how that the Hebrews came to Egypt?
It was through Joseph, wasn't it?
That's good. Amen. Anybody want to elaborate on that?
Pharaoh had given Joseph ownership pretty much, I do believe, and Joseph had set up there in Egypt, and from there I don't know a lot about it.
I see what you're saying. I see where you're going with
They
it.
had set up in Egypt.
Yeah. Anybody want to help out?
Was it Joseph the Dreamer? And it was all in God's design because there was a famine coming too. There was a famine in the land, and that was a part of the way God, to me, God was taking care of His people, because the Egyptians, they had plenty of resources, and Joseph was there because of his faithfulness to God. He was different than everybody else. It was something about what I was thinking, how as wicked as they were, they wanted to choose somebody on the outside to come in and be over everything. But they was followed down. They came down and they was able to eat. They were able to get their money back that they spent, but especially the brothers. But they mixed it. They mixed in. That's how it is. You take refuge in the land, and then people start to integrate, and then things change. Just like with us here. Back in the day, you didn't see Caucasians with blacks. Now, as long as we've been around each other, now you see what we call mixed race. The whites, the blacks, and that now you see it all over the place. But it was a time it won't like that. So I imagine that at the time with the whites were just whites, it was like the Egyptians were just Egyptians, and they integrated later on. But everything I remember about that was in our God's design.
And also, I do believe Pharaoh got jealous because the Hebrews had made a great population. And so then he tried to take them under ownership, make them as slaves, because they had overpopulated pretty much.
So you think about it, it all started, so to speak, physically. Naturally, it started with Joseph, to your point. But even before Joseph, God had already told Abraham what was going to happen to his people. He told him, y'all remember when he walked down through the fire, when he sacrificed animals and walked down through them and all that. And God talked with Abraham and told him what would happen, how that they would go into 400 some years of slavery. So, and when that prophecy or what God had spoken come to pass, it started with Joseph and his brothers, and his father Jacob. Jacob favored Joseph. Out of all his brothers, he favored Joseph. And then jealousy set in, and they plotted to kill him and whatnot. And then they determined that, one of them, who was it? Judah? Was it Judah or Reuben? One of them determined, it might have been Reuben, that, hey, let's sell him to the people that was coming. I don't know if they were Midianites. But anyway, they sold him into slavery. And then those that bought him sold him into slavery in Egypt. And so that's when Joseph was in Potiphar's house, and that's when Potiphar's wife tried to, take him sexually. And he refused and whatnot, and then he was accused of trying to take advantage of Potiphar's wife by Potiphar's wife. Mm-hmm. And so therefore he was put in a prison. In Pharaoh's prison and whatnot, and so he was up on the Pharaoh's leadership and prison in there. Well, during that time, that's when the butler and the baker came into prison and whatnot, and they was having trouble because of the dreams they had. Well, and Joseph interpreted, because he asked them, why are you so down? And then they told him of the dream that they had, and Joseph interpreted each one of them dreams. He told the butler that you going to be restored to your place, and the butcher or the baker, whichever one it was, he told him that you're going to hang him, and the bird's going to pluck out your eyes. And sure enough, it happened. And so after that happened, Joseph told him, the one that was restored to his place, he said, "Remember me." And just so happened, just like we always do, we forget. So years passed before, and what happened, it is amazing how God caused things to happen. He caused the Pharaoh to start having dreams. He was troubled, and he was so disturbed by the dream. Y'all remember about the fatty corn and the fatty calves versus the thin calves and the withered corn and whatnot. And none of Pharaoh's people could interpret the dream. And that's when the butler remembered. He said, "I know one that interpreted my dreams years ago." Mm-hmm. And that's when Pharaoh told him, "Go get him and bring him to me." And when he asked Joseph to interpret his dream, Joseph first of all told him it was God that knows the interpretation, but God gave it to him. He told him, he said, "Pharaoh, your dream, the two dreams you had is one and the same." In other words, the two dreams ain't but one. And both of them mean the same thing. Mm-hmm. He said, what the dreams mean is that you're going to have 7 years of plenty. Uh-huh. And then after that, he said, you're going to have 7 years of famine. Uh-huh. That's what it means. And then that's when Pharaoh asked him, "Well, how do we deal with this thing?" And Joseph, he said, what you need to do is choose someone that is wise and allow them to store up in the 7 years of plenty, that when the 7 years of famine come, you'll be just fine. And that's when Pharaoh made the decision. That was the climax right there. Right. He said, "I don't know any other person except you. Right. You're the one that is going to be over all the land. In other words, you will be over everybody except the throne, which is I'm sitting in." Right. Right. He placed Joseph second in command and put his what's the woman name? Zephaniah? Gave him a wife. And so Joseph was married, and he ruled over all Egypt. And he was ruling for so long that his brothers, he took on the look of the Egyptians, but he was still a man of God. Right. That was the difference between him and the Egyptians. Mm-hmm. He looked so much like the Egyptians that when his brothers came, because they was in the 7 years of famine now, and his brothers came because they were running out of food. They didn't have any more food, so they had to go to Egypt. And when they walked up and saw Joseph recognized them, know who they were, but they didn't know who Joseph was. Huh? And that's when Joseph put them to the test. And so we ain't going to get into the test of where everything going on. But in the end, back to your point, that when all was said and done, he brought them, he asked Pharaoh, and Pharaoh gave Joseph permission to bring his whole family into Egypt. So his whole family came into Egypt, and that's where they dwelled, and they lived happily. Everything was good. They was in a good place. Joseph, Jacob, and all Joseph's brothers was right there in Egypt. And that is when the Hebrews started to increase. They started to multiply in the land of Egypt. Now, remember, Joseph ended up dying. His brothers ended up dying. Now, the Pharaoh during Joseph's time had died. And other pharaohs had came, and they died. Then come a pharaoh that did not remember Joseph and did not remember what he did. Did not care about what he did. And all the Egyptians started to see that the Hebrews is outnumbering us. And they started to get jealous. The Hebrews, they had gain. They was getting things. They was growing. They was prospering. And the Egyptians was getting jealous of them and envious of them. And that's when they started giving them hard labor and start putting them into slavery. That's what happened. And then here we go here. They start crying out because of the oppression that they was in and the bondage they was in, and then they start calling on the name of the Lord. But God had told Abraham years and years before that this was going to happen. And Abraham didn't see it, not naturally, not physically, but it came to pass. And then that's where we are now. And so they was crying out to God, and God sent them a deliverer through Moses. Now Moses had to go through, because the Pharaoh during Moses' time, as he was an infant, it was not intervened by God. He would have been struck down. He would have been killed as a baby. And God, he divinely set that up. That Moses, not only that he would be in Egypt as a Hebrew, but he would also come into Pharaoh's house. Oh, have mercy. He would come and be raised up in his house. Y'all remember I was telling y'all the other week about how, they put him in the basket and they aligned it with pitch and whatnot, his mother, and they sent it down the river, and his sister Miriam followed the basket all the way till he got to the pool where Pharaoh's daughter was bathing at. And then she took that baby and took care of it as it was her own. But at the same time, the baby had to be nurtured and whatnot, and she got one of her handmaids to nurture the baby. But guess what? Just so happened the handmaid that she chose to nurture the baby was Moses' mother. She didn't know it. she did not know it. And so Moses was still raised by his mother in Pharaoh's house. And he was taught the ways of the Hebrew. Y'all remember when the Hebrew, well, the Egyptian was beating a Hebrew, and Moses killed him because he knew that was his brother that he was attacking. And this is where we are now. So that was the start of deliverance of Moses. Y'all see how these things come together? How he started delivering the people, and now after he had went away and came back, God gave him the authority and the permission and endued him with the power to speak things, and they come into being. And that's when the plagues came. God told Moses to tell Pharaoh this and tell Pharaoh that, and then the plagues started coming. And Pharaoh rejected Moses up to this point right here. We covered a lot of scripture, didn't we? Amen. And so at this point, the Lord explained in detail the purpose of all the plagues. They were designed not only to free the people of Israel, but also to show Pharaoh and his people that the Lord is supreme. Right. not Pharaoh.
Right.
Pharaoh think he's supreme. You know, during the time Pharaoh, when any time a Pharaoh was put in place, they set themselves in the position, in the mind, in the position that they are a god. Pharaoh themselves said that they were a god.
Invincible.
He is all powerful. His name is to be declared throughout all the earth. Yet to this point, Egypt's king had exalted himself. It is something how you exalt yourself, God bring you down. The Lord had already demonstrated his power and the powerless of Egypt's gods, including Pharaoh himself. The final 4 plagues would bring even more intense devastation. The Israelites living in the region of Goshen. So you know, you think about the plagues that occurred, it did not affect the Hebrew or the Israelites. It didn't affect them. You think about the water turning into blood. It didn't affect the Hebrews. When you think about the livestock dying, it didn't affect the Hebrew. They were fat. When you think about the flies and the lice and the locusts, it didn't affect the frogs. It didn't affect the Hebrews. That's something, ain't it? When the hail fell down and the fire, it didn't affect the Hebrew, just the Egyptians. So you think about Egypt. This is Franklin County. You got Lewisburg here. You got Franklin right there. Lewisburg was covered. It was disastrous. Franklin won't know sunshine.
Right.
That's how it was between the land of Egypt and the land of Goshen. But Goshen is still a part of Egypt. Now, for the first time, there appeared to be a change of Pharaoh's attitude. There appeared to be. We know how the story ends. So that's where he said it appeared to be. First, he said, I have sinned this time. That was a flag that came up automatically then. This time. So now, Pharaoh realized that he have somewhat lost control. So therefore, he had to say something to take the weight off him, that mercy would rest upon him somewhat. Because, I mean, you think about it, there's nothing now that his magicians can do now. Ain't nothing they can do.
Right.
You know, when you think about the water turning into blood, and they said they performed this thing, putting dye in the water, or whatever the case is, and said, well, this is all he done. Isn't that joke? Think about when he laid the staff on the floor and it became a serpent. Then each one of his magicians, they laid their staffs on the floor, and Pharaoh, ain't that to it. Anybody can do that. It's trickery, that's all. Not realizing that Moses' staff swallowed the other ones up.
Right. Right.
I don't want to jump ahead, but you know, in the book they go ahead and they state about the blood, okay, and then they said the fishes died. So that's supposed to have caused the flies to come, and you know, just keep making speculations as you know, it wasn't the power of God. But all along, it was the power of God.
It was.
It's just man who don't have the Spirit of God in him, you know, that doesn't know.
See, God controls the supernatural and the natural, right? And so to your point, you know, who can cause water to turn to blood? Who can do that? And so if water becomes blood, then the fishes can't live in blood. They live in water. And so they die. And so when they die, nobody can just drink blood, they need water to live. And so when the fishes die, they're floating up right down in the water and whatnot, and here come flies. And flies carry diseases, pestilence start to come. So when you start to see that, and then vegetation starts to die. When all these pests and stuff come, you start to see the trend of how things happen. God is using the natural and the supernatural to cause his glory to be announced and for them to realize that he is God. Mhm.
Is it because of something he did?
No. It's because he knew the heart of the people. It goes back to what Apostle Paul said was talking about before when it come down to what's the word I'm looking for? Start with P. Come on, y'all. Somebody get it. Start with a P. The word I'm looking for.
That goes to what?
Predestined.
Oh.
Thank you, Tyrone. He knew what we was going to do and what we was going to be before we did. Now, think about this thing for a moment. He said that, and we'll probably get to this. You look at the title, Pharaoh's hardened heart. But then when you read the scriptures, it said God hardened Pharaoh's heart.
That's right.
Y'all remember hearing that?
Yeah.
Now, what would be the question that you would ask if I said that God hardened Pharaoh's heart? What would be the question?
Why would he harden his heart?
Why would he harden Pharaoh's heart? He ain't bother nobody.
He knew him. That's why he knew him before he was born.
He knew God knows us.
That's right.
Before we even know ourselves. He knows what we're going to do.
He knew it.
And so therefore, he knows that Pharaoh was not going to listen to him. He knows that Pharaoh was going to do his own thing. So at the time, as we see it, God hardened his heart.
And also, Pastor, you're looking at, he admitted that he was a sinner and his people were sinners. But the whole thing was, I'm still not changing. Ain't that something? Ain't that something?
Amen.
He'll give in, as we know, when his son died, he really gave in, but his heart hardened again.
Yeah.
Because he was just wicked, because he was so wicked. He was that wicked type that no matter what. And that's when you put yourself up there to say, I am it, because basically he can snap his finger and things happen. People bow down to him, people worship him, he had musicians on his side. So basically, this is what God was showing him, but God had to show his people a lesson.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And God was showing his people a lesson, because when these things happen, they look at the children of Israel, they over there, sunshine, they sit back in the chair chilling, and they're over there with frogs and locusts and everything going on. They be like, what in the world? And not only that, but as she said earlier, they multiplied. They kept, every time they got beaten, the more they got beaten, the more they got whipped, the more they multiplied. Can't change you imagine that.
That's right. That's what Scripture said.
Yeah,
They couldn't stop you from
they couldn't.
All right. Anybody else? I don't know. We can give you All right. Let's look at 29 and 30.
And Moses said unto him, as soon as I am gone out of this city, I will spread abroad my hand unto the Lord, and the thunder shall cease, neither shall there be any more hail, that thou mayest know how that the earth is the Lord. But as for thee and thy servant, I know that ye will not yet fear the Lord God. A promise of Moses. Moses assured the Pharaoh that as soon as he left the city, he would spread his hands to the Lord, supplications, and the thunder and the hail would cease. Moses was under no illusion about Pharaoh. The king's word sounded encouraging, but Moses knew he did not really respect the Lord God. Moses, who had complained after the first meeting with Pharaoh that the king had not yet delivered Israel.
That the Lord had
The
not
Lord.
yet.
Okay, the Lord had not yet delivered Israel. Had now learned that God's plan to deliver the Hebrews also included the humbling. He knew that this was
the humbling of Pharaoh and Egypt's false gods.
He knew that this was a monumental work that would take time. God needed to be fully glorified by the spectacle of Egypt punishment.
Now, so right here it says, and Moses said unto him, as soon as I am gone out of the city, I will spread abroad my hands unto the Lord, and the thunder shall cease, neither shall there be any more hail, that thou mayest know how the earth is the Lord. So he listened to his request, or what he asked. He said, okay, well, how could Moses do that? How could Moses say that? You know, okay, Pharaoh, I'm going to walk out of this city. And as soon as I get out of your city, then I'm going to spread forth my hands, and this storm and this hail is going to stop. How can he say that?
After Moses said it,
He
the Lord told him to say it.
He had compassion on them still, and yet, you know.
Yeah, those two. Right. God told him, I see what you're saying, that he had compassion, and compassion wants you to say things that will favor the person that's going through. But just because you have compassion on somebody don't necessarily give you permission to speak something. You know what I mean? And so therefore you have to know that you have been told and given the authority that you will speak something, and faith will come in operation, that when you say something, because God, Moses had a relationship with God that know that what God said will come to pass, that when God spoke to him and God told Moses to say this and say that and to do this and to do that, when he did it and when he said it, it will come to pass. That's the faith right there for you. But look at here. He said, but as for thee and thy servants, he said, I will do this thing. I will cause all this stuff to cease. But as for thee and thy servants, I know that you will not fear the Lord God. How do you think that he would know that? After the man said, we're sinning against God this time, and we are wicked, blah, 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 blah. How did he know that Pharaoh was not going to fear God?
God had told him that too. He
Oh.
still ain't gonna let his people go.
Listen, with a mighty hand. He said, with a mighty hand, he will not let my people go. Woo. So this is what we have to understand. I mean, you know, when you look at it, this is where when you see things take place in the scriptures and in the history, the events that took place, things that happened, that's when you need to take that step back in the biblical time and read what led up to this. Or why did they say that? And then when you shift back, you will see that how God has spoken and how God's people has spoken, how the prophets have spoken. Because when you listen at the apostles and the prophets, these things was guided by God, and they was given permission by God to say and do such things. Right. Even God himself did not go against himself. And what I'm talking about is Jesus Christ, when he made himself manifested in the flesh. When things came against him, what he said? It is written. He already knew this.
That's right.
Whoa. Y'all getting deep now. It's something that, you know, I don't know about you, Pastor, but sometimes I get caught up, you know, I'm looking, I want my commentary and I want my expository, because I need to read what the author said. You know, I don't need to be making up my own thing.
Right.
Well, it's not the author's own thing, and it's not my thing either.
Praise God.
But it's the Spirit of God pour things in you that you can pour out.
That's right. That's right.
Amen. So we need to say what He tell us to say.
Amen.
When it's time to say it.
And that's what happened in the day, Pastor. A lot of people are not saying what God is saying.
Mhm.
Amen. You're looking at lately, the latest thing was Benny Hinn denouncing the prophecy, or the what you call the ministries they have out now, prosperity ministry.
Mhm.
He said that God didn't want him to do it, and a lot of people were saying amen to his comments, and I didn't, Paul for a minute. I said, well, if he done lied on the Holy Spirit, has he not blasphemed? And I've been pondering that for the last couple weeks when he came out and it's been all over the air that he's denouncing this prosperity ministry. But he told these people, which he got money from over the years, that God told him to say certain things, to give. And so now he's denouncing that he was wrong. But he ain't giving the money back to the people that he done poured out, that gave him his last dime. So I just kind of wanted to wait to see if he going to give away all his riches. As the man asked Jesus about everlasting life,
So
to give all that you have, give all that you have.
Oh.
Give all.
Yeah.
And so I was wondering, because a lot of these prosperity ministry, or a lot of these prophets come in and they tell people you're gonna get something if you give, God gonna bless you with a check, or bless you with a house, or bless you with His business, and it be false. It be falseness, especially on the TV now. It's like wildfire. People sitting their last dime in. Their mortgage payments. Now God give us a sense too.
Yeah. That's right.
But they tell lies.
Yeah, I ain't seen that yet, but
Oh yeah.
we'll have to take a look at that.
He said he
But
denounced it.
it don't matter how tight you think you can hold on something. It'll fall through.
Amen. That's like Pharaoh. He was holding on his pride. He had to let that go out the wild.
All right, so let's look at 31 and 32.
And the flax and the barley was smitten, for the barley was in the ear, and the flax was boiled. But the wheat and the rye were not smitten, for they were not grown up. The devastation of crops. Exodus 9:31 and 32 acts as a parenthesis in the narrative, giving a summary of the devastation that had taken place as a result of the hailstorm. The text notes that the flax and barley, which were nearing the time of harvest, were destroyed by the storm. Flax was important in the making of linen clothing, which was highly valued by the Egyptians. Barley was used for bread, beer, and animal food. The loss of these crops was a great blow to the Egyptians. However, two other crops, wheat and rye, survived the hailstorm. Rye refers to spelt, a low-grade species of wheat. These crops, which were more needful for humans, were harvested about a month later than flax and barley. Why did God see fit to include such details here? There are probably at least three reasons. First, the ancient world was primarily agricultural, and readers would naturally be interested in what kind of damage was done by the plague. In fact, knowing this would reveal to them the power of the Lord in a way that might not be so evident to those unfamiliar with agriculture. Second, there is an indication of God's mercy in this description. The Lord's judgment did not destroy the crops on which the Egyptians were most dependent. If Pharaoh had followed through on his promise to release the Israelites, the essential crops would have been spared. His failure to do this, however, led to the loss of the wheat and the locust plague that followed. Third, the specific mention of the crops that were destroyed emphasized again the impotence of Egypt's gods. Nut was the goddess of the sky in Egyptian religion, and Shu was god of the atmosphere. Set was the god of storms, yet these gods offered no help. Those who had labored long and hard in the hot sun witnessed in a few moments the total destruction of their crops. Their desperate cries to their deities had not brought relief.
Amen. Now we can, one thing that we need to become more spiritually sensitive, because we know that the things that occurred then, they still occur now. The elements of our atmosphere, the earth and whatnot. We still get the hailstorms, the rain, thunderstorms, tornadoes, hurricanes, typhoons, tsunamis, earthquakes, and all these things. We still get them. They ain't going nowhere. But we look at it as just a natural phenomenon. We don't look at it as, what is earth? What are we doing in the earth to cause destruction upon the earth? What we do, we turn to science. And for science, just like the magicians give an explanation that cause us to relax. When we need to be paying attention to what is going on in this earth and how are we being contributors to what's going on. I was looking at what was a few weeks ago. It was California. It was in California somewhere out west. They had snow blizzard, something, snow, fall, ice, or whatever the case is. Just a few weeks ago, somewhere out west, and they said that is so unnatural, unnormal, and yet, but you look and see what's going on, and nobody have an explanation of why, but science will try to give some detail. They blame it. They can blame it on global warming or whatever the case is. Well, what's causing the global warming? Right. How far will you go to try to explain something before you say, you know what? We have a problem here. We have sinned against God, and we're doing things that we should not be doing. This is some of the things that is going on. We really need to start looking at science, and we really need to go into prayer. I'm not just talking about Heavenly Father. I thank you for what I have, but I want more. I'm not talking about that kind of prayer. Mm-hmm. But I'm talking about a repentant prayer. A godless sorrow prayer, a communication prayer, asking God, what must I do? What would you have me to do? How do I need, God, I know I need to change. But a lot of us, we want to change the world, right? But what we don't want to change is ourselves. Listen, my wife, she messes up all the time, but I'm good. Every time I see her, she's making a mess. But I ain't never done nothing wrong. We want, Lord, change her. Make her like me. Come on now. I don't see a problem with myself. But that's exactly what the problem is. Every time we turn around, if you look at it, if you really, really look at it, how often do we point at ourselves for being at fault about something? How do you point at somebody else? Multiple times a day. Come on now. A day. I ain't talking about every day again. Multiple times a day. You really think about it. We are accusing somebody somewhere about something multiple times per day. Y'all ever thought about that?
Hey, but Pastor, just like you just pointed out, you said we always put the blame on somebody else. Mm-hmm. And you say, when you said make my wife like me, and then you look later it seems like she done got worse, but that's you.
Exactly.
You do that.
Yeah.
Make her more like me, Lord. Make her more like me. And she get worse, and then you ask for it.
That's it. We really need to look at this thing.
I know it.
And you know, that's scripture. You see the little speck in everybody else's eye.
Come on,
You
man.
can't see the log in yours.
Yeah, you see it. I mean, that's what it is. Absolutely. But these are some of the things that happen. And this is why, talk about the devastation. When you look at yourselves and the things that you got going on, we need to take the blinders off. Because we'll make a mess of something. And we will, but we have been making a mess of things all along. If you were to take the time and look around you, you would see the mess you made. You will see it. And so, this is what Egypt had not seen. Amen. All right, let's go. We want. I tell you, I know I'm going to go this deep here, but let's go. What we at, 33? Huh? Okay. 33.
And Moses went out of the city from Pharaoh and spread abroad his hands up unto the Lord. And the thunders and hail ceased, and the rain was not poured upon the earth. The faithfulness of Moses. True to his word, Moses left the city and immediately spread out his hands before the Lord in prayer. The Lord heard his prayer, and the storm ceased. Moses' faithfulness to his word stands in stark contrast to Pharaoh.
Now, so Moses did what he said he was going to do, even though he knew Pharaoh was not going to hold to his word. He knew it. He didn't guess about it. He didn't have hopes about it. But why? Because he told Pharaoh. He said, I know you and your servants are not going to change. I know you're not going to change, but I'm going to do what I said I'm going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And when he walked out of town, he did it. And everything stopped. You think about when hail falls now. It's one thing. When hail falls, it does damage. I mean, just 3 years ago, we had that bad hailstorm? $12,000 something worth of damage to my house. $12,000 something. Thank God for insurance. Had to get the roof replaced and some of my siding replaced. So they were agrarian type of people during that time. In other words, they were farmers. And so therefore, all they did was growing crops. Now, if a hailstorm would do that to hard wood and shingles, what will it do to a plant? Yeah, so it just tore the plants apart. And then not only that, to make sure that it will fall apart, you got hail and you got rain. So if you got a lot of rain, the ground starts to get soft, and the ground starts to get soft, there you go, your roots start to come up, make it very weak, and then when the hail hit it, it knocks it right on over. But Moses did what he said he was going to do. Let me ask you a question. What do you think you would have done if you was in Moses' shoes?
But in the natural of the day, they different than they. But I ain't gonna do that, man. That joke ain't changed with me. That keep on. I know he gonna change. I ain't gonna waste my time.
Do they put you in the mind of somebody?
Today us. Yeah.
Watch this. No, even biblical.
Uh-huh.
Instead of being like Moses, we'd have been like Jonah.
Right.
Yeah. God, the people ain't gonna change. You need to go ahead and destroy them. I ain't going to Nineveh. I'm going to Tarshish.
They're not going to listen to your word.
Yeah. Put me on the ship. I want to be far away from this.
Right.
Tell the Almighty God, but we ain't gonna do it.
Yeah. And then, go ahead.
You know, now they try to build stuff and do things and they call it hail-proof and hurricane-proof and all of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But what happened is that the storms increase. You know, you have hail fall the size of baseballs and different things.
Yep.
So,
That's true.
Ain't that nigga do, bro.
That's right.
Ain't that nigga do.
I know, and he is absolutely right. I know you got to kind of be a builder or know about building in order to understand these terms and things like that. Me and Mike, we used to do insulation, and you know, when the builders put the rafters together, they put on the rafters what they call the hurricane brackets or the tornado brackets. When a hurricane or tornado come through, the structure would stay.
Okay.
But to his point, you listen. You're trying to come against God.
I know that, man. Look, if the hell don't get there, fire will.
What is a piece of strip? I mean, it's just all it is. It's a piece of metal that they put on each bracket, on each rafter, a thin piece of metal to fortify that rafter. Yeah.
What's holding the rafter up? he gonna burn that down. Then you got it nailed and screwed and
Yes, sir.
Then you can do.
But this is what we do.
Exactly.
Yeah. Boy. All right, we got one more before we done, right? 34 and 35. Somebody, anybody.
And when Pharaoh saw that the rain is withheld and the thunder ceased, he said yet more and hardened his heart, he and his servants. And the heart of Pharaoh was hardened, neither would he let the children of Israel go, as the Lord had spoken by Moses. The hardening of Pharaoh. As soon as Pharaoh saw that the rain and hail and thunder had stopped, he sinned yet more. Idea is that he sinned again, that is his once again Willifin did what was wrong. His particular sin is spelled out in the rest of the verse. In the next, he hardened his heart and refused to obey God's command to release the people of Israel. While Moses quickly kept his word to Pharaoh by praying for the plague to end, the Egyptian king just as quickly abandoned his promise to let the Israelites go. Through this plague and the previous ones, the Lord had revealed himself to Pharaoh as the supreme, all-powerful God. He had demonstrated his righteousness, faithfulness, and persistence, and he has shown the earth that the earth belongs to him. Pharaoh had been humbled and forced to now compliance with the Lord's demands. Pharaoh's heart was not really moved, but the heart is against Moses and Israel's God. The hardening of the heart speaks of stiffness, stubbornness, obstinacy. Is that right?
Yeah,
Stiffness.
The expression is used throughout the scripture to describe the idea of the stubborn resistance to God. In case of Pharaoh, the Bible speaks repeatedly of his hardening his heart, but also speaks of his heart to be hardened by God. How are we to understand this? God clearly hardened Pharaoh's heart so that the Lord's wonders might be multiplied in Egypt. In fact, God said that he raised up Pharaoh for the very purpose of revealing his power so that his name may be declared throughout the earth. The Lord used the downfall of this powerful ruler to demonstrate his own sovereignty. At the same time, Pharaoh, like all who willingly resist the Lord, was rightly held to account for his actions. We may find it hard to reconcile these two ideas, but then as finite humans, we can never fully grasp the ways of the infinite God. Leaving behind the difficult theological questions regarding the hardening of Pharaoh's heart, there's a very practical issue to address here. Why would a man like Pharaoh resist the Lord in the face of such overwhelming evidence that he is indeed all-powerful, righteousness, and sovereign over the earth? The king's stubborn pride is his own power, ability, and supposed dissuaded him to keep his promise and to give the demons of Israel God.
So, as you see what she had read here, while Moses quickly kept his word to Pharaoh, and he did, by praying for the plague to end, the Egyptian king just as quickly abandoned his promise to let the Israelites go. Now, y'all see that, right? But was it already spoken?
Already.
Already spoken. If you compare and contrast verse 30 to verse 34, you will see what Moses had already taught the Pharaoh. He said, your servants ain't going to change. Then verse 34 said, Pharaoh, his servants didn't change. You see it? That's what happened. God already know, and God allowed Moses to give prophecy by the word of God to Pharaoh. You know, people always think prophecy is supposed to be good, which it is good, but what I mean by good or bad or whatnot, it may not go the way you want it to go.
And sometimes we feel that personally it's supposed to benefit us.
Mm-hmm. But you see, Moses spoke here to Pharaoh something that Moses should not have known, according to Pharaoh. But Moses, even though he said that, you know what, I was evil and we were wrong. We did this, you know, God is God or whatever the case is. Moses looked at him and said, I'm going to heed what you're saying. I'm going to stop these things, you know, by the might of God. I'm going to speak. I'm going to pray to God. These things are going to stop. But you ain't going to change. He prophesied to him right there. And he did not change. So the hardness of the heart speaks of the stiffness, stubbornness, obstinacy, things like that. And so when you think about it, you know, when you listen to those words, is there a hardening of the heart around here? Oh yeah, put your toes on. Put them on. Well, I mean, you know, think about it. When things like that, when we get to talking about things like that, there's a quietness come over the atmosphere. Look, I ain't gonna pick on you lot, but I'm just saying. And this for everybody. When I say things like that, we'll say amen to brush it off. Amen, Pastor. Amen, Apostle. Amen. And no, we guilty. Y'all, come on now. And at the same time, they say, I know you ain't going to do it, but God is telling me to warn you to do this. But I know you ain't going to do it. But we'll say, yeah, I was wrong, and I love God, and I was wicked, I did this and I did that, and then we leave here or wherever it is and go and do the same thing that we have been doing before. Well, but why? This is the question right here. See, they pointing at Pharaoh. Y'all remember that point that I was just talking about a little while ago? We pointing at Pharaoh. Watch this. Why would a man like Pharaoh, let's scratch that. Why would a man like me, resist the Lord in the face of such overwhelming evidence that he is indeed all-powerful, righteous, and sovereign over the earth? When we look every day that we cannot scientifically explain what is going on, what has occurred, and we know we have heard, when we see the miracle that goes on from day to day, and yet we still deny the power of God. We said we acknowledge it, but our disobedience is saying that we are denying it. Come on now. Why? I leave the pun on that one. It's all right. Think about it. When we get serious, and I mean serious, I'm not talking about feeling. When you get serious, the answer will come to you. We'll know that we were truly foolish in our ways. Amen. I'm going to stop right there. I'm going to put it in the hands of the teacher for the children.
fruit of the Spirit? Say it. You gotta say it loud so they can hear you.
Peace. All right.
And what did I tell you that peace means? No. Right.
All right.
Right. And Trent, your fruit of the Spirit was.
All right.
And goodness means to be good.
All right.
And yours was what? We talked about hers being joy, and joy means to be happy.
Yeah, you happy? All right. You can be happy now.
Well, I'm sure what you did there.
See, there you go. Beautiful.
Do I dare ask? Do the adults have anything they want to talk about? We can talk about.
I said pop off, so I meant it. Over pop off.
Y'all are ashamed. Go ahead.
We talked about Moses this morning. We talked about the rebellious Pharaoh not allowing God's people to be free, and we also spoke of how God had put in Moses' heart, had put in Pharaoh to harden his heart because of he wanted the peoples to be free in Israel.
We also talked about how, like, not to point a finger at somebody else and, like, correct yourself as well instead of just pointing at the next person and trying to say all that what they do wrong when you're not doing right yourself.
Amen. Thank you, ladies. I ain't gonna hold y'all no longer. I know nobody else will want to talk. Secretary.
Sunday School, October 13, 2019. Prayer was done by Pastor Davis. The lesson was Pharaoh's hardening heart. The scripture came from Exodus 9:27 through 35. The teacher was Pastor Davis. We had 22 in attendance.
Amen. Now forgive me for running a little bit over. It was all good. So let us come to our feet to dismiss the Sunday school portion. Let's dismiss Sunday school, God will. Amen.
Amen. Amen.